I want you to understand something before I tell you what happened on the Veleshin Mercy. I had been a surgeon for 31 rotations. I had opened up Corvani thoraxes and stitched together Delathea gill membranes so thin you could read scripture through them. I had rebuilt the crystalline spine of a Grethani ambassador after a shuttle crash that should have killed her. I had seen injuries that would make a battlefield medic weep. And none of it, not a single moment of my career, prepared me for the day they brought a human onto my operating table. None of it. The Veleshin Mercy was a Thalari medical frigate, Class 4. One of the larger ones in the fleet, assigned to the Koveth boundary, that ugly stretch of contested space between the Galactic Union's inner territories and the frontier mining colonies that nobody wanted to officially govern but everybody wanted to tax. We orbited a dwarf star called Pelus 7, and our job was simple. When ships broke down, when miners got crushed, when freighter crews came in with radiation burns or decompression injuries, we patched them up, sent them home. Logged the report, moved on. It was boring work, most rotations. Good boring. The kind of boring that lets you sleep through a full cycle without your communicator screaming at you. That changed on day 214 of our deployment. I remember the exact moment because I was eating. A plate of fermented silkworm paste, the Larry comfort food, don't judge me, and a cup of warmed mineral broth. I was sitting in the officers' mess, alone, reading a technical journal on microsuture techniques that a colleague back home had published. The lights in the mess hall were dimmed to evening mode. The ship hummed its usual low frequency. Everything was calm. Then the proximity alert screamed. Not the gentle chime we got when a supply shuttle docked. The full, shrieking, three-tone alarm that meant an unscheduled vessel was approaching at emergency speed. The kind of alarm that dumps adrenaline into your blood, well, the Thalari equivalent, which is a cortisol analog we produce in our dorsal glands. I dropped my fork. The broth sloshed across the table. I was already running. By the time I reached the medical bay, Nurse Prin was already there. Prin was Delathea, tall, slender skin that shifted between pale blue and silver depending on the ambient moisture. She had 6-fingered hands that could thread a suture line faster than any machine I'd ever seen. Best trauma nurse on the ship. She was pulling open supply drawers when I came through the door. "What do we know?" I asked. "Mining freighter. Registry says it's the Caldwell Rock, human-operated vessel out of Pelus Colony 7. I stopped walking. "Human." Prin glanced at me. Her membrane-covered eyes blinked twice, which in Delathea body language meant she was just as unsettled as I was. "Human," she confirmed. "Now, let me explain something to you. In 31 rotations of surgical practice, I had never treated a human. Most Thalari physicians hadn't. Humans were relatively new to the Galactic Union. They'd been members for maybe 15 standard cycles at that point. Their species had been cataloged, sure. There were files, biological summaries, a brief xenoanatomy module I'd reviewed during my residency years ago. But humans mostly stayed in their own sectors. They used their own doctors, their own hospitals. They didn't come out to the Koveth boundary much, and when they did, they tended to handle their own problems. There was a reason for that, though I didn't understand it yet. "How many casualties?" I asked, pulling on my surgical membrane gloves. "One, just one. The rest of the crew is stable, minor exposure injuries." "But this one," Prin trailed off, reading the incoming data on her tablet. Her skin shifted to a darker shade of blue. "Dr. Sevon, the injury report is extensive." "Define extensive." She turned the tablet toward me. I read it. Then I read it again, because surely I had misunderstood. The patient, a human male, 34 standard years old, name listed as Marcus Cole, occupation listed as structural engineer, had been on the exterior hull of the Caldwell Rock performing a repair when a microasteroid field swept through the area. The ship's shielding had protected the main hull, but Cole had been outside, exposed. A fragment roughly the size of my closed fist had punched through his suit and entered his left side, just below the ribcage. It had passed through soft tissue, nicked something called a kidney, fractured 2 of his ribs on exit, and torn a hole through his suit roughly 8 centimeters wide. He had been exposed to hard vacuum for approximately 90 seconds before his crewmates pulled him back inside. 90 seconds in vacuum with a penetrating torso wound. "He's alive," I said. "He's conscious," Prin answered. I stared at her. "That's not possible." "The crew confirms it. He's conscious and talking." I didn't believe it. I want to be clear about that. I had treated decompression injuries before. When a body is exposed to vacuum, the moisture in your tissues begins to vaporize. Blood vessels near the surface rupture. Gases dissolved in your bloodstream start to bubble. For most species, the Lari, Delathea, Corvani, 30 seconds of vacuum exposure is survivable with immediate treatment. 60 seconds causes permanent neurological damage. 90 seconds is death. There is no version of 90 seconds in vacuum where you are conscious and talking. But humans, I was about to learn, did not read the same manual as the rest of us. They brought him in on a stretcher. 4 of his crewmates carried him, 3 men and a woman, all human, all wearing patched mining suits that smelled like ozone and machine grease. They were shouting, not at us, at each other, and at Cole. "Stay with us, Mark. Stay with us, buddy. Don't you close your eyes, don't you dare. Somebody get the doc. Where's the doc?" They were loud. That was the first thing I noticed about humans in person. They were so incredibly loud. Every emotion at maximum volume, every word fired like a projectile. The Delathea nurses flinched. Even I, with my Thalari auditory filters, had to adjust my hearing threshold. And then there was Cole. He was lying on the stretcher, and he was, there's no gentle way to say this, a mess. His suit had been cut open from the neck down. The left side of his torso was a landscape of torn flesh, dark blood, and something white that I realized with a jolt was exposed bone. A rib. I could see a human rib, cracked and jutting at an angle that made my stomach clench. His skin around the wound had turned a mottled purple-black, burst capillaries. Vacuum exposure does that. His lips were split and bleeding. The moisture had been pulled right out of them. His eyes were bloodshot. The whites turned almost entirely red from ruptured vessels. And he was looking at me. Not staring blankly. Not in the glassy, unfocused way of a patient in terminal shock. He was looking at me with clear, sharp, annoyed eyes, like I was late for an appointment. "You the doctor," he said. His voice was rough, scraped raw, but coherent. I couldn't speak for a moment. Prin stepped forward. "We're the medical team. We're going to help you." "Great," Cole said. He winced, and I saw his jaw clench so hard the muscles in his neck stood out like cables. "Because this really, really hurts." "Hurts?" he said. "It hurts." He had a hole in his torso, 2 fractured ribs, a damaged organ, and 90 seconds of vacuum exposure on his record, and his complaint was that it hurt. I remember thinking this man should be dead. Not injured, not critical, dead. The biological math didn't work any other way. But there he was, bleeding all over my operating table, alive. We got to work. I called in everyone. Dr. Ulith, my senior pathologist, a Corvani, quiet, meticulous, the kind of doctor who could identify a cellular anomaly from a single blood sample. Nurse Teven, a young Thalari who had only been on the ship for 2 rotations but had steady hands and a sharp mind. And Prin, of course. Prin was indispensable. The first problem was the blood. Humans bleed. I knew this from the xenoanatomy files. All warm-blooded species bleed. But humans bleed a lot, more than seemed reasonable, more than seemed survivable, frankly. When we removed the remnants of Cole's suit and exposed the full wound site, blood began pooling on the table at a rate that made Nurse Teven's eyes go wide. He's hemorrhaging, Tevan said, reaching for a coagulation injector. Wait, Dr. Eulith said. She was scanning Cole's blood with a portable analyzer, and something on the readout had caught her attention. Wait, look at this. I leaned over. The blood was clotting. On its own. Not in a disordered, chaotic way. Not like the clumping you see in Corvani hemolymph when it's exposed to air, which just creates a useless gel. Cole's blood was forming structured clots, organized ones. Platelets, his files called them platelets, were rushing to the wound site in enormous concentrations, linking together, building a lattice of fibrin threads that was actively trying to seal the damaged vessels. His blood is repairing itself, Eulith said. Her voice was flat, clinical, but I knew her well enough to hear the disbelief underneath it. That's in the file, I said, though I hadn't fully appreciated what it meant until I was watching it happen in real time. Humans have a coagulation cascade. It's an automated clotting response. Automated, Eulith repeated. She looked at me. Dr. Sevan, his blood is building scaffolding. There is a chemical signaling chain happening here that involves at least 12 distinct protein factors working in sequence. This isn't a simple clotting response. This is an engineering project. She wasn't wrong. Most species require external coagulants to stop significant bleeding. The Lari blood thickens when exposed to certain atmospheric compounds, but it doesn't seal wounds on its own. Delathi blood doesn't clot at all. They rely on pressure bandages and synthetic sealants. The idea that a species existed whose circulatory fluid could independently identify a breach, recruit specialized cells, build a structural mesh, and begin sealing the wound, all without any medical intervention, was extraordinary. But we didn't have time to be amazed. Cole was still losing blood faster than his body could replace it, and the internal damage was severe. We need to go in, I said. Opening up a human was unlike anything I had done before. The first thing I noticed, the thing that genuinely unsettled me, was the density. Humans are dense. Not just muscular, though Cole certainly was. I mean structurally. Layer after layer after layer of tissue, each one serving a purpose, each one more complex than the last. Skin, then a layer of fat, subcutaneous fat, the files called it. Not decorative, functional, insulating. A thermal regulation layer built directly into the body's outer shell. Beneath that fascia, a web of connective tissue so tough that my laser scalpel had to be recalibrated twice. And beneath that, muscle. Good Lord, the muscle. Human skeletal muscle is unlike anything in the Galactic Union's medical database. The fibers are thick, dense, and arranged in overlapping sheets that can contract with a force that seemed absurd for an organism of Cole's size. I knew from the files that humans were classified as a high-gravity adapted species, but knowing a fact and seeing the physical evidence of it are very different things. The abdominal wall alone has 3 distinct muscle layers, Tevan said, working alongside me. He sounded shaken. 3, overlapping in different directions. It's like armor. It is armor, I said quietly. We cut through, carefully, slowly, and found the damage. The fragment had passed through the external oblique, the internal oblique, and the transversus abdominis, the 3 layers Tevan had noted, before puncturing the peritoneum and striking the left kidney. The kidney was lacerated, not destroyed. I'd expected total organ failure from the impact energy readings, but lacerated. A deep, ragged tear across the lower pole. I looked at it and felt something I can only describe as reluctant awe. The kidney was still functioning. Damaged, bleeding, torn open, and still filtering blood, still doing its job. I could see it working. The renal artery was pulsing, pushing blood through the organ, and the organ was processing it, sorting waste, producing output, like a machine with a cracked casing that refuses to stop running. "Can we repair it?" Prin asked. "We have to try," I said, But I need to understand something first. I looked at Dr. Ulith. He has 2 of these. 2 kidneys, yes, Ulith confirmed, checking the file. Most humans do. Why? Ulith looked at me. Redundancy. Redundancy. The word sat in the air between us. Redundancy. This species had built-in backup organs, not as a rare mutation, not as a medical anomaly, as a standard feature. Every human walking around had a spare kidney, just in case. What else is redundant? I asked. Ulith scrolled through the file. Lungs, 2. Adrenal glands, 2. Eyes, ears, all paired sensory organs. They can survive the loss of significant portions of their liver, which will then regenerate to functional capacity. They have an appendix that appears vestigial but may serve as a reservoir for beneficial gut bacteria. They have a spleen that filters blood, but can be removed entirely without killing the patient. They can lose organs and survive. Multiple organs, simultaneously in some cases. Tevan made a sound that in the Lari culture is roughly equivalent to a nervous laugh. What kind of planet did these people evolve on? He asked. A death world, I said. I'd read the classification. Earth, Class 12 gravity well, tectonic instability, extreme weather patterns, predator-saturated ecosystems, microbial environments so hostile that the planet's own organisms had been waging biological warfare against each other for billions of years. Everything about the human body, I was beginning to realize, was a survival response. Everything was built to take damage, to absorb punishment, to keep going when any rational biological system would have shut down. And we hadn't even gotten to the hard part yet. The hard part was the immune system. We needed to introduce surgical nanobots to assist with the kidney repair. Standard procedure for any internal organ surgery on almost every species in the Union. Tiny machines, smaller than cells, programmed to enter the bloodstream, navigate to the wound site, and assist with tissue bonding at the cellular level. I'd used them 10,000 times. I injected them into Cole's bloodstream through a port in his forearm. 90 seconds later, every single nanobot was dead. I stared at the readout. Ulith stared at the readout. Prin pulled up the scanner log and replayed it in slow motion, and we all watched what had happened. Cole's white blood cells had attacked the nanobots. Not randomly, not as a slow, confused immune response that might take hours to mobilize. Within seconds, his immune system had identified the nanobots as foreign bodies and launched a coordinated, targeted assault. White blood cells, and there were so many of them, the concentration was staggering, had swarmed each nanobot, engulfed it, and destroyed it, dissolved it, with enzymes so aggressive that the nanobot's titanium alloy casings had been corroded through in under a minute. Titanium, Tevan whispered. His blood dissolved titanium. Not his blood, Ulith corrected. His immune cells. They produce localized enzymatic compounds designed to break down foreign material, any foreign material. She paused. This system isn't just defensive. It's hostile. It treats every unrecognized entity as an existential threat and deploys overwhelming force. I stood there for a long moment, looking at the scan data, trying to reconcile what I was seeing with everything I knew about biology. Every species in the Galactic Union has some form of immune function. The Thalari have a passive filtration system. Our hemolymph passes through a series of internal membranes that trap foreign particles. Effective. Gentle. It works. The Delathi rely on external symbiotic bacteria that colonize their skin and neutralize pathogens. The Corvani have a mineral-based immune response that encases foreign bodies in calcified shells, isolating them rather than destroying them. None of these systems would attack surgical tools. None of them could dissolve titanium. The human immune system wasn't a defense mechanism. It was a weapon. A paranoid, hyper-aggressive, perpetually mobilized army living inside the body of every single human being, ready to go to war at a moment's notice against anything it didn't recognize. I thought about Earth again, about the billions of years of microbial warfare, every bacterium, every virus, every parasite, every fungal spore and toxic compound in the soil and water and air. Humans hadn't just survived that environment, they'd internalized it. They'd built an immune system that matched the hostility of the world they came from. And I had just injected foreign objects directly into that system's territory. "We're going to have to do this manually," I said. "Manually?" Prin looked at me. "Dr. Sevan, the kidney laceration requires microscale tissue repair, without nanobots. We'll use sutures, direct intervention, hands and tools. That will take hours." "Then it takes hours." Prin stared at me. Then she started laying out the microsuture kits. Cole was conscious for parts of the surgery. That, more than anything, is what haunts me. We had administered what should have been a full anesthetic dose, calculated from the xenoanatomy charts, adjusted for his body mass, delivered through an IV port. For any Thalari patient of equivalent mass, the dose would have produced 12 hours of deep unconsciousness. It lasted 40 minutes on Cole. 40 minutes. He metabolized a full general anesthetic in 40 minutes. His liver, that monstrous, oversized chemical processing plant sitting in his abdominal cavity, identified the anesthetic compound, broke it down into component molecules, and flushed it from his system with an efficiency that made Dr. Eulith sit down heavily on a supply crate and put her head in her hands. "His liver," she said. "His liver is a detoxification engine. It's processing the compound as if it were a poison." "It is a poison," I said. "All anesthetics are poisons. We just use them in controlled doses." "And his body is removing the poison, automatically, without being asked." Eulith looked up at me. "Dr. Sevan, this organism is fighting our treatment, not because it's malfunctioning, because it's working. Every system in his body is doing exactly what it was designed to do: protect the host, eliminate foreign compounds, repair damage, maintain function. His biology doesn't know we're trying to help. It just knows we're introducing unfamiliar substances, and it is removing them." She was right, and it was maddening. We adjusted the dosage, increased it by 30%. That bought us another hour. Then his liver adapted, literally adapted, producing new enzyme variants specifically targeted at the anesthetic compound, and he started to surface again. He didn't scream. I want you to know that. When the anesthesia wore off and he could feel what we were doing to the inside of his abdomen, Marcus Cole did not scream. He clenched his fists so hard that his fingernails broke the skin of his palms. He gritted his teeth until I could hear them grinding. The tendons in his neck stood out like bridge cables, and sweat, a fluid I'd never seen before, a cooling mechanism. His body was literally dumping heat through his skin to keep his core temperature regulated during extreme stress, poured down his face and soaked the table. But he didn't scream. "Doc," he said, his voice a tight rasp, "you still working back there?" "Yes," I said. My hands were inside his body. I was stitching his kidney together with microsuture thread while his immune system tried to reject the thread, and his muscles kept tensing around my instruments. "Yes, I'm still working." "Good, that's good." He exhaled through his nose. A controlled breath, deliberate, just keep going, I can handle it. I can handle it. I had my hands inside a man's abdominal cavity, sewing an organ back together without adequate anesthesia, and he was telling me that he could handle it. Prin was monitoring his vital signs. She turned to me, and her skin had gone almost white, the Delathea equivalent of shock. "His heart rate is elevated but stable," she said. "Blood pressure is holding. It shouldn't be holding. With this level of pain stimulus, his cardiovascular system should be in crisis, but his body is compensating." "How?" "There's a compound flooding his bloodstream. The file calls it Adrenaline. She said the word carefully, as if tasting something unfamiliar. It's a hormone produced by his adrenal glands. It's Dr. Sevan. It's a performance-enhancing chemical. His own body is drugging him. What does it do? Everything. It increases heart output, dilates airways, redirects blood flow to essential organs and skeletal muscle, suppresses non-essential functions, elevates pain tolerance, enhances reflexes and cognitive focus. She looked at the readout again. It's a combat drug. His body has its own built-in combat drug, and it deployed it automatically in response to the trauma. I stopped suturing for a moment, just for a moment, and I looked at Marcus Cole, this sweating, bleeding, broken man on my table who was enduring what should have been unendurable, and I thought about what Prin had just said. His own body was drugging him, keeping him alive, keeping him functional, keeping him conscious and aware and fighting, because that's what the human body does. It fights. It doesn't know how to stop fighting. Billions of years of evolution on a world that tried to kill every organism on it every single day, and the result was a species that treated catastrophic injury as an inconvenience. Not a death sentence, an inconvenience. "Keep going, Doc," Cole said again. His eyes were closed now, his jaw was locked, but his voice was steady. So I kept going. The surgery took 7 hours. 7 hours of manual microsuturing, tissue repair, fragment extraction, and vascular reconstruction. 7 hours during which Cole's body fought us at every step, his immune system attacking our tools, his liver metabolizing our drugs, his muscles tensing against our instruments, his clotting cascade sealing things we needed open and leaving open things we needed sealed. But at the end of those 7 hours, his kidney was repaired. The rib fractures were stabilized. The penetrating wound was closed. And Marcus Cole, who by every medical standard in the Galactic Union should have been dead 16 times over, was sleeping. Actually sleeping. Not unconscious. Not in a coma. Sleeping. His body had decided that the crisis was over and switched into recovery mode, and recovery mode for a human meant sleep. His cellular repair rate is accelerating, Eulith said, monitoring him from a console across the room. She hadn't moved from that spot in 3 hours. She'd just been watching the data, watching it and shaking her head. Accelerating how? I asked. I was sitting on the floor next to the operating table, my surgical gloves discarded, my back against the wall. I was exhausted. The Lari don't have sweat glands, but if we did, I would have been drenched. His body is increasing blood flow to the wound sites, delivering elevated concentrations of oxygen and nutrients. His cells are dividing at nearly 3 times the rate I'd expect. She paused. He's building new tissue, Dr. Sevan, right now. While he sleeps, his body is constructing new muscle fiber, new connective tissue, new skin cells. It's filling in the gaps. All species heal. Not like this, not this fast, and not with this level of structural integrity. She pulled up a comparative scan. Look, the new tissue forming around the rib fractures, it's denser than the original bone. I leaned forward, denser. His body isn't just repairing the break, it's reinforcing it. The new bone growth at the fracture site is thicker and harder than the surrounding bone structure. It's as if his body is saying, this spot broke once, it won't break again. I sat with that for a long time. A species that heals by making itself stronger. That takes damage and responds not just by repairing what was broken, but by building it back harder, tougher, more resistant. A species whose scars aren't weaknesses, they're armor upgrades. What kind of evolution produces that? What kind of world demands it? A world where getting hurt was inevitable, and the only organisms that survived were the ones who learned to come back stronger every single time. Cole woke up 9 hours after the surgery. 9 hours. I had expected, hoped, really, for at least 48 hours of post-operative unconsciousness. Time for his body to stabilize. Time for us to monitor his recovery and adjust treatment as needed. 9 hours. He opened his eyes, looked around the recovery bay and said, "Is there anything to eat?" Prin dropped a medical tray. I walked over to him, running a scanner along his torso. The readings were... I don't know how to describe them without sounding like I'm exaggerating. The kidney laceration was already showing signs of tissue bridging, new cells spanning the gap where the tear had been, knitting together in organized layers. The rib fractures were calcifying. The deep tissue wounds were closing from the inside out, new muscle and fascia forming in layers so precise it looked like something a machine would produce. But it wasn't a machine, it was his body, doing what it had always done, what it was built to do. "You need to rest," I said. "I've been resting. 9 hours, right? I feel better." He tried to sit up, winced, then sat up anyway. I watched the muscles in his abdomen contract around the wound site, the same muscles I'd cut through during surgery, and hold. They held. Damaged, sutured, barely healed, and they held his weight as he pulled himself upright. "Mr. Cole." Marcus, you had a penetrating abdominal wound. You lost a significant volume of blood. You were exposed to vacuum for 90 seconds. Your kidney was lacerated and 2 of your ribs were fractured. You need to rest." He looked at me, and then he did something that I have never forgotten. He smiled. Not a grimace, not a pained, forced expression. An actual smile, warm and genuine and slightly crooked, like he found the whole situation privately amusing. "Doc," he said, "I've had worse." I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. "You've had worse." "Broke my collarbone when I was 14, fell off a horse. Broke my ankle playing football in college, the bone came through the skin. Had my appendix burst when I was 26, almost died from that one actually." He said this casually, conversationally, like he was listing items on a grocery list. "This is bad, don't get me wrong, but I've had worse." Prin was staring at him with an expression I'd never seen on a Delathie face before, something between horror and fascination. "You've had multiple severe injuries," she said slowly, "throughout your life." "Everybody has, that's just life." He shrugged with a sutured abdominal wound and looked around. "Seriously though, is there food? I'm starving." "We fed him." I want to dwell on this for a moment because it was another revelation. "We gave him a nutrient-packed standard post-surgical recovery blend, high in protein analogs and simple carbohydrates, designed to support cellular repair. He ate it in about 4 minutes. Then he asked for another, and another. His metabolic rate has increased by 60% since the surgery," Ulith reported, watching the data with an expression that had moved past disbelief into something like professional obsession. "His body is consuming fuel at an extraordinary rate to power the healing process. Caloric expenditure is. Dr. Sevan, at this rate, he'll need to eat roughly 4 times the caloric intake of a comparable Masdalari patient just to maintain his current repair trajectory." "Is that dangerous?" "Not for him. His digestive system is remarkably efficient. He can process a wide range of organic compounds, carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, certain plant matter, even some substances that would be mildly toxic to other species. His body is extracting every available calorie and directing it to the wound sites." I watched Cole eat his 3rd nutrient pack. He was sitting up now, legs over the side of the bed, color returning to his face. The burst capillaries in his eyes were already fading. His body was reabsorbing the leaked blood, recycling it, putting it back into circulation. "You're staring, Doc," he said between bites. "I apologize, I've never treated a human before." "Yes, how am I doing?" "You should be dead," I said plainly. "I was too tired for diplomacy." Cole laughed. He laughed. A real laugh, full and rough and genuine, and it made him wince because it pulled at his sutures, but he laughed anyway. "I get that a lot," he said. Over the next 3 days, I watched Marcus Cole heal at a rate that rewrote everything I understood about biological recovery. Day 1 post-op, the kidney laceration was 50% closed. The tissue bridging had accelerated overnight, and new vascular connections were forming, tiny blood vessels, brand new, growing into the repaired tissue to supply it with blood. His body was building infrastructure, supply lines, like an army securing territory after a battle. Day 2, the deep tissue wounds were nearly sealed. The muscle layers I'd cut through during surgery, the 3 overlapping sheets of abdominal armor, were reconnecting. New fibers were threading through the damaged zones, and the scar tissue forming at the incision sites was, as Ulith had predicted, denser than the original muscle. Tougher. His body was reinforcing the weak points. Day 3, he was walking. Walking, with a healing kidney and 2 fractured ribs and a wound that should have kept him immobile for months. He was walking laps around the recovery bay, one hand pressed to his side, jaw tight, sweat on his forehead, but walking, moving, refusing to stay still. "Why?" I asked him, genuinely. "Why are you pushing yourself? Your body needs rest." "No," he said, and there was something in his voice that I hadn't heard before, something old, something that went deeper than this one man and this one injury. "My body needs to move. If I lie still, I stiffen up. The scar tissue sets wrong. The muscles atrophy. I need to keep moving, keep the blood flowing, keep everything working." He wasn't guessing. He knew. Some deep, instinctive, species-level knowledge that immobility was death, that the moment you stopped moving, the world you came from would eat you alive. Move or die, heal while running, fix yourself on the march. That was the human way. On day 4, Captain Renix came down to the medical bay. She was the commanding officer of the Veleshian Mercy, a senior Thalari naval officer with 40 rotations of service, and a face that rarely showed surprise. It showed surprise now. Cole was doing push-ups. Modified ones, sure, with his weight shifted to protect his left side, and he was grimacing with every rep. But push-ups, 4 days after surgery, 4 days after vacuum exposure, 4 days after an injury that would have killed a Thalari outright and left a Corvani in regenerative stasis for a full cycle. "Push-ups," Dr. Renix said to me, her voice carefully controlled. "Explain." "I can't," I said. "You can't." "Captain, I have been studying this patient's biology for 4 days, and I can explain the mechanisms, the clotting cascade, the immune response, the adrenal system, the metabolic healing rate, the bone density reinforcement, the tissue regeneration, the redundant organ structure. I can explain all of it individually. But when you put it all together, when you look at the total picture of what this species is, I can't explain it. I can only describe it." "Then describe it." I thought for a long moment. "They're overbuilt," I said finally. "Every system has a backup, every response is disproportionate, every defense is aggressive. Their bodies treat injuries as engineering problems and solve them in real time. Their immune systems are military grade. Their pain tolerance is absurd. Their bones get stronger when they break. Their muscles get harder when they tear. They can lose blood, lose organs, lose consciousness, and keep going. They don't just survive damage, Captain. They adapt to it." Renix watched Cole finish his set and sit back against the wall, breathing hard, one hand pressed to his bandaged side. "Where did they evolve?" she asked. "A Class 12 death world, predators, pathogens. Natural disasters, extreme temperatures. Their planet tried to kill them every day for 4 billion years. And they survived. They did more than survive. They conquered it. They became the apex predator of a world that produces apex predators the way other worlds produce rainfall." I paused. "Captain, we've been classifying humans as a standard mammalian species with above-average intelligence. That classification is wrong. They're not standard anything. They're the product of the most hostile evolutionary environment in the known galaxy, and every cell in their bodies carries the evidence. Renix was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I want a copy of your full medical report sent to Union Central Command." "Why?" "Because, Doctor, if humans are what you're describing, then the Galactic Union needs to know. Not just the medical division. Everyone." She looked at Cole again. He was drinking water now, enormous amounts of it, his body demanding hydration to fuel the repair processes burning through his tissues. Everyone needs to know what these people are. Marcus Cole left the Velashin Mercy on day 7. 7 days. 1 week from penetrating abdominal trauma, organ damage, fractured ribs, and vacuum exposure, to walking out of my medical bay under his own power, carrying his own bag, and shaking my hand with a grip that made my Thalari bones ache. "Thanks, Doc," he said, just that simple, warm. As if I'd treated a headache rather than saved his life. "Marcus," I held his hand a moment longer, "please be careful." He grinned, that same crooked private grin. "Always am." He wasn't, we both knew he wasn't. That wasn't how humans operated. Careful wasn't in their vocabulary, not because they were reckless, but because they lived in a way that made careful insufficient. They climbed things. They explored things. They pushed their bodies past every reasonable limit and then pushed further. They broke themselves and healed and broke themselves again, each time coming back a little bit harder, a little bit tougher, carrying their scars like medals. I watched him walk up the boarding ramp to the Caldwell Rock. He moved slowly, carefully, favoring his left side. But he moved. He didn't ask for a wheelchair, didn't ask for help, just walked, one step at a time, back to his ship, back to his crew, back to the void that had nearly killed him a week ago. And he'd go back outside. I knew he would. The next time something broke on that hull, Marcus Cole would put on a suit and step into the vacuum and fix it, because that was his job and that was who he was. Prin stood beside me at the observation port as the Caldwell Rock undocked and drifted away. "Dr. Sevan," she said. "Yes." "I've been reviewing the human evolutionary record, their historical database. And they used to set broken bones with sticks and cloth. Before they had medicine, before they had technology, they would take a fractured limb, hold the bones in place with wood and fabric, and just wait for the body to fix itself." She paused. "And it worked. It worked because their bodies were already capable of repair. The medicine came later, the technology came later, the body came first." I nodded. "They didn't build their medical science to keep themselves alive," Prin continued. "They built it to help their bodies do what their bodies were already doing. Every piece of human medicine, every drug, every procedure, every machine is just an assist. The body does the real work, always has." I stood there for a long time after the Caldwell Rock's engines flared and the ship disappeared into the dark. And I thought about my 31 rotations, all the species I'd treated, all the surgeries I'd performed, all the lives I'd saved with careful technique and precise instruments and advanced technology. Then I thought about a man who'd been hit by a rock in space, exposed to vacuum, torn open from the inside, and who had walked out of my medical bay a week later asking if there was anything else to eat. Built differently. That's what Nurse Tevan had said on day 3, when he was reviewing the case file and trying to make sense of it all. He'd looked at the data, the clotting cascade, the immune response, the adrenaline system, the healing rate, the bone reinforcement, the organ redundancy, the metabolic efficiency, the pain tolerance, and he'd shaken his head and said 2 words. "Built differently." Yeah, they are.